Times are rough, this time I see it too. All this bullshit drama, I can see right through. Everybody wants something they can't have, so they gon' put it on you. Wherever you go, yeah, you can take me there. Over the ocean, I can see us there. Let's run away and be forever young. We'll catch the sun where there's no need to run. Wherever you go, yeah, you can take me there. 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 I see you, and you see me too. We may be broke, but we see the truth. All this bullshit drama, I can see right through. Everybody wants something they can't have, so they gon' put it on you. Wherever you go, yeah, you can take me there. Over the ocean, I can see us there. Let's run away and be forever young. We'll catch the sun where there's no need to run. Wherever you go, yeah, you can take me there. Yeah, you can take me there. Yeah, you can take me there. Yeah, you can take me there.
Yo. Yeah. Well, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me? No comment. Okay. Well, I mean, I'm speaking, so. Check, check, check. I can hear you guys now, but okay, you guys can hear me?
Actually, I'm going to play the surprise first.
Mr. Wonka,
I am extraordinarily busy, sir.
I just wanted to ask about the chocolate. The lifetime supply of chocolate for Charlie. When does he get it?
He doesn't.
Why not?
Because he broke the rules.
What rules? We didn't see any rules, did we, Charlie?
Wrong, sir. Wrong. Under Section 37B of the contract signed by him, it states quite clearly that all offers shall become null and void if, and you can read it for yourself in this photostatic copy, I, the undersigned, shall forfeit all rights, privileges, and licenses herein and herein contained, etc., etc. Fax mentis incendium gloria culpum, etc., etc. Memo bis punitor delicatum. It's all there, black and white, clear as crystal. You stole fizzy lifting drinks. You bumped into the ceiling, which now has to be washed and sterilized, so you get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
Good to go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Down in the Valley. My name is Edson Ochoa, and today I am accompanied by my co-host Jacob Young, and not only that, we also have Sean Ringrose on from Generation Orange, and our special guest for today is Greg Luca from The Monitor. Guys, how are y'all doing?
I'm doing really well.
Oh. That's good to hear, guys. So before we go on, I really want to say a couple of things. More than anything, be sure to check out our friends from the Beautiful Game Network. Be sure to follow them on Twitter, Facebook at the BGNFM. Be sure to check out their website at www.bgn.fm. While you're there, check out not only our podcast, but also other USL podcasts. And we keep on adding new members to the network almost every day. So be sure to check that out. Be sure to also check out our website, which is downintheRGV.com. Proudly hosted by Embrace Fusion, which is Sean's company. Also, be sure to follow our social media on, if you haven't done so already, at Down in the RGV on Facebook, on Twitter, RGVFC fans on Instagram, and check out our SoundCloud, Google Play Store, the iTunes Store, as well as Stitcher for our podcasts. Also, one last little thing, be sure to also subscribe to our Down in the Valley gaming channel. We are continuing to add content to it. I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun with either Rocket League or The Crew 2 with other games coming in the future. So, having said all of this, I just totally forgot to press record on the thing. But it's okay. It's just the intro. So, guys, how are you doing? We'll go ahead and start with Jacob. How are you doing, man?
Doing well. Looking forward to discussing everything that has happened for a while, or yeah, since this whole week has been crazy, and not to mention to also talk about the 0-0 draw that was at Sporting Kansas City's place. I know it's Swope Park Rangers, but that's where Sporting Kansas City played.
Definitely. Greg?
Oh, I'm doing great. Glad to be back. I appreciate y'all having me on.
Yeah, not a problem. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. And you have a lot of in-depth knowledge of whenever you cover the Toros, whether it's after the games or whatever every bits of information that managed to get out in public by the organization. You're there to get it. So we really appreciate you taking the time to come in on here.
Oh, yeah, awesome, man. Thank you guys for reading, too. It's nice to have some following with this stuff.
No problem. Sean, how is you?
How is you? I'm great. I'm great. Lots of Twitter discussions going on lately.
Oh yeah,
That
definitely.
have been good, but very, very. There's a very engaged fan base right now, and it's important for fans that are looking for information on either club to follow Generation Orange at Gen Orange Radio, and follow Down in the Valley at Down in the RGV, and Greg Luca, of course, at Greg Luca. I know that's really hard to remember, but it's at Greg Luca because seriously, there's so much information out there right now. Some of it's good, some of it's bad. Not everything can be spun in a positive light, but at the same time, it's very valuable to have an educated fan base, especially with the things right now that are going on, especially with what happened this past week. And so it's been my pleasure to be kind of in the middle of some of that discussion and kind of helping spur some of that discussion on. And I know you saw it today. It's just like beyond just what happened last night with the Dynamo, but just RGV and the Dynamo and pro referees. It's been a crazy last few weeks. I think Jacob kind of hit the nail on the head when he said that, and that's just from the Dynamo side. I know it's been just as crazy on the RGV side, and I'm doing my best to keep up, and I appreciate having you available to kind of fill me in. But man, it's crazy right now. It's a good crazy, but it's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. So welcome, Blues fan, to the live stream. Be sure to, guys who are watching, be sure to leave a like, share it with your friends, and if you haven't subscribed to Down in the Valley, be sure to subscribe. So let's go ahead and start with this week's episode. We've mentioned it many times. It's been a hectic week for the RGV FC organization. We had Bert Garcia step down as president. We had a couple of movements in the RGV FC front office and many other things. But Greg, what have you heard, or what did you hear? What did you see from that press conference last week?
Yeah, I think the first thing that jumps out to people when you hear that somebody in Bert's position is leaving, people wonder whether it was his decision or whether he was pushed out or however it might have gone down. And everything I've gathered is that it was indeed his decision to leave, and he had the option to continue in the position if he wanted to, but just wanted to try out something new and see if he could make it in a different path and sort of forge his own adventure that way, so to speak. So he really just wanted to pursue this new opportunity at a sports consulting firm that's kind of starting to get off the ground here, and he's still laying the groundwork for that. But it was really interesting to see how many people came out to support him at that thing. So there's been a lot of press conferences, different availabilities of that type here, and they had a couple hundred people there. Like the entire Toros Academy was there, which makes sense because he helped bring that into existence, and the whole Toros roster was there too. So a lot of people Bert really meant a lot to, and it was really interesting to see that. Even Brandon Morales, who just signed last week from the Academy, came up and read a letter of sort of gratitude to Bert for the opportunity that he helped him get. So it's really interesting to see where they're going to go now with him gone, but certainly he had a pretty big impact in the Toros existing at all. I think that might not be the case if it were not for him.
So what was mentioned or what items were mentioned besides the Bert Garcia dropping down? Was there an interim person? Was somebody named, or was it just like, oh well, he's stepping down that's pretty much it.
I think it happened somewhat suddenly, such that they have not named somebody for that role and probably won't until they find somebody who's permanent in that position. So I talked to the CEO of the organization, Rene Borrego, and he basically said that there was still yet to be a meeting with the owners group to have a discussion about how are they going to fill the Lord, or how are they going to fill the role and who's going to be next. So that's something that's still very much in the process, and I think it might take a month or two or longer to really find somebody who's a right fit for it and can slide in and do kind of work sides too.
It's, I mean, I guess you can say it was kind of all of a sudden from what you're telling me, that did it not give the organization time to find a good replacement. I mean, but still, I feel I don't know how this is going to affect the team.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. I mean, obviously from the sports side, with the roster and coaching and whatnot, they have very little role in it. It's the other side of it might come into play. And the really interesting thing that I've learned since this happened is if you just Google, Viper staff directory, and you look at the people listed under front office, I believe it's 5 out of the 7 names there are not in those positions anymore. For various reasons, they've pursued other opportunities over the past couple months. So my understanding of how it's looking right now is just all the work that those people all did has been divvied up among everybody else, and they're just trying to find a way to make it work and get by. So it's really tough to say what kind of impact that's going to have. It's one of those things where I think in any organization, the higher you go up the ladder, the harder it is to determine exactly what that person brings. So I think we'll learn more about it as time goes on to see what impact that has.
Jacob?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with him. It was weird to see. I mean, I don't really want to give away who really left on air, but it was weird to see a lot of these people leave. Even a couple, or one person really that I know of, that decided to leave in February but made it public last Friday. So that's a really interesting thing to put out there, that he kind of knew that the ship was going down and decided to leave early.
Yeah, like it just seemed that there were a lot of people that kind of announced they weren't with the organization anymore for it to be a coincidence. I don't know if maybe a couple of these people were loyal to Bert Garcia, or if there is something from up top, from directly from the owners, from whether Alonso Cantu or you mentioned the ownership group that made the decision to make these changes, kind of take advantage that Bert Garcia decided to pursue a different environment. With sports, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they mentioned one of the things that I did see was that I think he was looking to become like a sports agent or something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Greg. But still, I mean,
it's essentially going to be like a consulting thing. I think they're going to call it RGV Ventures. And basically they can work with different, even if it's high schools or other organizations around here, do the stuff that they did well with the Toros and Vipers and trying to secure sponsorship, things like that.
So pretty much he's gonna be the third party aiding the Toros and other local RGV sports. Which is good for the growth of sports in the Rio Grande Valley. But still, I'm kind of at that point whether he could have held on until after they found a substitute for him.
Yeah, I don't really know the exact inner workings of that and how long that'll take. He sort of just has to do whatever he thinks is best for him. I know the timeline that he chose is basically the USL meetings are coming up. I don't know exactly when they are, but hopefully they would have somebody else in place in time for that to sort of reset the cycle. And then the Vipers are expected to name a new coach sometime next month or within 4 to 6 weeks. So then whoever is in place would be able to get to work with that person from their first day and kind of build that relationship with the organization that way. So he thought it was a good time in general for him to step away. I mean, I think if you think about how long he's been with the organizations and how much he's built them up, there's no question that he loves those organizations and wants to see them succeed and would do what he thinks is best for them. So I don't think that he did anything wrong by stepping away when he did. It's just sort of the nature of the business that they're probably not going to start looking and be able to find somebody until after he's finally made that move.
Yeah, you do have a point there. I mean, he's done. He's been in this program. You know, I believe since almost the beginning of the Vipers program, and consistently year after year. You know, done the work for him for make sure that professional sports in the Rio Grande Valley grew to a point where, I mean, now you have, like, with the Vipers, you know, a successful organization, not only in the business side, but also the fact that they were able to get the partnership with the Houston Rockets, and look how successful has been now for both teams, for whether it's the Rockets and the Vipers.
Yeah, just to expand on that really quick, if you really think about Bert's background, he started as a volunteer assistant in the basketball side for basketball operations in 2007 for the first season, and just kept moving up and up and up until they gave him the chance as team president. So his personal story is very interesting.
Sean?
You don't have to answer this, but I have to ask this because this actually came up on Glenn Davis's show here in Houston as a question to Matt Jordan, and Matt Jordan answered it, and it was a good answer, and I'm curious to get from the RGV perspective. The question was asked to Matt Jordan, and I'm going to frame it more on the RGV side in this case, but Greg, at this point, what is your impression as to the longevity of the RGV Houston relationship? I asked that question with the understanding that there is probably some form of agreement or contract that has been put in place and was put in place at the outset of this relationship. And I'm just curious if you, at this point, have gotten any sense as to how the ownership and how the front office / executives feel related to that agreement, and if there's any talk at all that maybe the Dynamo are dissatisfied. And then I will fill in RGV fans as to what was said on Glenn's show so that there's some background for that as well. And Greg, like I said, you don't have to answer that if you don't feel comfortable answering that, just so it's clear.
No, I think it's a really good question. I do not know if I was not covering the first season of Toro, so I don't know if they came into existence, if there was a timeline put on it. But I do know that the entire premise of the organization existing as it does is built on the idea that it's connected to the Houston Dynamo or some MLS team. They have no interest in owning and operating an MLS or a non-MLS affiliated team here. They wouldn't want to have just some independent soccer club, especially playing with how much they've invested in that venue and the size of it and the scope of it. They're pretty much banking on being able to have a team at this tier or higher for the foreseeable future. Now, it really is a question for Houston, because the attendance numbers being what they are was the process when they first set out to find a place to host their USL team. Houston was looking around and saying, is it worth it to be this far away? And it would only be worth it to be that far away from Houston if they really thought the market could sustain it and be highly profitable. So it's really hard for me to answer. I know I can say pretty confidently, I don't know for sure, but I can say pretty confidently from this perspective that they'll keep their relationship with Houston as long as Houston's willing to have them.
Okay. I think that makes plenty of sense. And to add some background on that, like I said, I would. Matt Jordan did say that they are, from the Dynamo perspective, they are very content with what is going on. They're very happy with what is progressing with the Toros, and they're very happy with the relationship. He said that, and the question was actually framed in reference to here in Houston, they just broke ground, they being Houston and not the Dynamo, but the SaberCats, which is the Major League Rugby team here in Houston, professional rugby, broke ground on a 3,000-seat stadium, which will bring additional parking, additional facilities, etc., in the same general area as Houston Sports Park, which is where the Dynamo and Dash practice and where a lot of local leagues and teams end up playing a lot of their tournament games. And so the question was asked just in reference, well, now that that's been broken ground, what is how do you guys feel? Is there any probability that you guys might be looking to move your USL team or have a USL team here in Houston due to the distance and due to, the just convenience of having them right there. And, like I said, Matt Jordan said, right now we're perfectly content with what we have. We're very happy with the relationship. We do, see it's providing, it's yielding fruit. And he referenced directly Memo, and he referenced Eric Bird, and he referenced, I want to say Connor Donovan was part of that conversation as well. And so just to provide some background on that, a lot of what I hear is, from fans is that they're not happy. But then you look at from both front offices and both sides of, the kind of the upper echelon looking down, if you will, or the executive tier looking down, and they're getting what they hoped to get out of it. Maybe not 100% fully what they were hoping to get out of it, but they're getting and seeing the fruit of the labor, if you will. They're seeing that it is yielding some sort of profitable measure. Now, whether that's just youth development, which is fine from a Dynamo perspective, that's still yielding something. And so I just wanted to ask that question with the frame of reference that you have, Greg, from the RGV perspective. So I appreciate your answer. Thank you for that.
Well, yeah, that's really interesting, because when you think about how the Dynamo benefits from this, it sort of is irrelevant why the team is in a lot of ways, because they're just looking at player development who becomes useful to them.
Yep.
And I know the business side of it was something that they were interested in when everything started. And if you really want to focus on that, last year the Toros were drawing 7,000 fans on average a game, or at least that's what was reported. And they still felt like they could have been better.
Yeah.
And now this year they're averaging 4,600. I mean, it's a significant drop-off from where they were last year for whatever reason. And you would think then that could cause even more discontent, but I don't know how much that bleeds up to the Dynamo organization, just because that's stuff that hits RGV's profit margins and the owner down here more than it hurts the Dynamo.
Absolutely. And I think you kind of said it too, in that, you have to look at it from the perspective of the executive side of it. If they're achieving what they're trying to achieve, which is the youth development, and that's what Matt said very, very clearly, that really we look at RGV as the youth development pipeline. It's we want them to be successful, but we also want them to be churning out players and churning out development among our young players. And so I got the sense from that interview, of course, bearing in mind, and I have to say this for RGV fans, Matt Jordan is very good at GM speak, like most GMs are.
Yeah.
And so, keep that in mind. Take it with a grain of salt for what it's worth. But it did come across as it was a kind of candid answer, because I don't think he was expecting that question necessarily. And I think it was an honest answer in that they are happy with what they have right now. That doesn't mean things can't change. That doesn't mean other opportunities can't come around and decisions made otherwise. But at this moment right now, the answer to that question was they're very happy with what they have right now, and they are very happy with the direction the club is moving. And I think those words are very important to remember, because they are willing to accept, and I know this just from having to talk to different people, but they're very willing to accept a down season or two, so long as they're still seeing the benefits of the actual youth development, because 1 or 2 seasons is not going to make or break them. But if it's a continuous thing of 5 or 6 seasons of low attendance and 5 or 6 seasons of a lack of youth development, they're far less likely to be content with the way things are going in the direction of the club. But if there is progress being made, and even with a low attendance, if there are measures being taken to try to improve that, and I have to believe that RGV are attempting some sort of measures to improve that, then the way I look at it is that's why the Dynamo are happy. They're not expecting perfection out of the RGV franchise. What they're expecting is that they put in the effort and the time, and and don't just rest on the first season success and call it a day. They want to see improvement, and they want to see at least strides towards improvement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think within the RGV organization, part of the thinking is the first year you're going to do pretty well in the new stadium because it's a new stadium and people are excited about it. Then the second year you might see a dip because that's worn off a little bit. And then the third year you'll figure out where you really stand.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep an eye on next season. But the other thing is, even if there was a little bit of people being upset or discontent with those things, they're already, by virtue of the people who have left, being forced to make a lot of changes and reevaluate a lot of things. So the new group is either going to be better or worse, you would think, but potentially could bring about some change and really shake up this discussion overall over the next couple of years.
Absolutely. And again, it's not a bad relationship. It's it's not a relationship that isn't yielding some sort of fruit. It is yielding development of players. I mean, we're seeing it. And I think there is something, and I've talked about this with Edson, and I know I've mentioned it with Jacob as well. We're seeing, from a Dynamo standpoint, the benefit, but RGV's starting to see the benefit now that the Dynamo have kind of filled out their depth and they're no longer having to necessarily consistently pluck all of the best players from RGV. You're seeing the benefit on the RGV end from a talent standpoint of having players be sent down for 2, 3, 4 matches, 2, 3, 4 weeks. You're seeing the benefit in players being signed by the Dynamo specifically for RGV that would probably not otherwise be signed. You're seeing the benefit, and the major benefit, and you talked about this last week on the show, was the scouting part of it. That you don't get that scouting if the Dynamo are not involved with this organization. It's not easy to do that scouting when you don't have a permanent scout. And while the Dynamo don't have a permanent scout, it comes from Matt Jordan's network. It comes from Nick Calba's network of people that they know in these various regions that are not the U.S., South America, and Central America. And I think the longer that relationship continues, the more RGV will see the benefit out of it, the more you'll see those types of players come in that are on the cusp of mid to upper tier USL player that have the aspirations to make it to MLS and beyond. And those are players that if they spend 1 to 2 years in USL with RGV, that's better than most USL clubs can hope for long term, because most USL clubs, their top level players are no further than USL players. So take that for what it's worth as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things you keep on mentioning, and we always mention in Generation Orange, is that Matt Jordan is a tried and true GM. His scouting network, he has had more ups than downs with the Houston Dynamo, especially in the Wilmer Cabrera era. I mean, now with the fact that they've brought in Carlos Small to the Toros, who continues to be the part of that scouting by Matt Jordan. Matt Jordan taking his time to go down to the Rio Grande Valley, and talking to players, talking to the coach and his staff, just goes to show that, hey, they really do want this team to improve. They obviously they can't get us like Ronaldo, obviously,
Didier Drogba for that matter.
Yeah, or anything like that. But in the end, I guess you could say out of 5 players like Didier Drogba, maybe that Didier Drogba might be the only one that might actually come and continue to do work rather than just slack around for the paycheck. And
Greg, I'm going to throw this to you because I know you have an answer for it, which I appreciate. But Edson just mentioned Carlos Small. What is your impression? Where is he at? How close is he to getting minutes? And have you had a chance to ask how the coaches or technical staff feel about him there yet?
Yeah, I was actually just talking about them with this week. I think he's getting very close, and we can potentially see him this weekend. It's just been a question of fitness, but they were doing preseason training with the team he was with and within that league when he was transferred here. So he's decently far along in that, and I think as soon as this weekend he could be ready to see the field. But it just remains to be seen. They're not going to fully tip their hand on that, of course.
Oh, of course not.
So he's already received his visa and his ITC, correct?
That's my understanding, yes, that he would be eligible to play if they choose to go there.
That's extremely good news, and it's really good, the fact that he's going to debut with the Toros at home, in front of the home crowd.
Oh yeah,
and hopefully the fans will give him the support that I think he needs to. Once again, I talk about this, form a connection between players and fans.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it's important to keep in mind too that he may not start, but that doesn't mean he's not going to play. Mm-hmm. Like Greg said, he's trying to get match fit. He's trying to get that full 90 fit, and that isn't something that happens in a week or 2 weeks. It takes a little bit, and so I would be surprised. Now, if he does start, he's probably going to go a half, maybe 60, 70 minutes, depending on how where he is at physically. But even like you said, even the fact that he's taking the field at this point, this quickly into everything is a sign of progress. It's a sign of movement forward. And I think that, given time, I don't think he's going to come in and be a banger right out of the gate and 5 goals in his first debut or anything. But, give him time to develop a little bit, give the staff time to work with him, give him time to build that chemistry and that relationship. We say it all the time on the Dynamo side when it comes to Generation Orange stuff, that it's important to remember that usually a player's first season is them adapting to the league. And the same is going to be true with his move to USL. It's going to take him a little bit of time to adapt, but I think the adaptation from where he was to USL is a lot quicker than the adaptation of where he was to like MLS directly. So hopefully he does come in and produce really quick. But even if he doesn't, just remember, give him a little bit of time. He's got to develop that relationship. He's got to learn where those balls are going to be served into the box. He's got to learn where those balls are going to be passed on through balls. He's got to learn those things and learn where other players are going to be. So when he's not in position to make a play, he can still get the ball to someone who is. So I think it's just important for fans to remember that as well. Don't come in expecting him to bang out 5 goals in the first match. Although if he does that, then by all means you can lose your crap over that because wow.
Jacob?
Exactly. And Sean, you talk about relationship, chemistry. And that's such a key thing. Remember at the beginning of the season, Edson, how just the Toros were just also Gerson was making all these crazy changes to the lineup, trying to figure out that right bond in a way to this whole team. And it's amazing because how later in the season this team has come in and they've actually formed this kind of bond in a way. We keep on seeing regular lineups happening. My point to that is because you talk about Carlos Small and how is he going to fit into this lineup? Yes, it will be it will be time. If he ends up performing at close to the end of the season, I will be really impressed that he's made this bond with the players. But if he doesn't, I expect him to make that bond with the players next season.
Yeah, hopefully. After all, from what I've seen in social media, is that the loan is for 6 months. They also did mention that there is an option to buy for Carlos Small, and in the end, this is more than anything a future prospect for the Dynamo.
Greg, actually along those lines, since you brought that up, do you know, was it made public or are you aware if the option to buy is a set price or is there room to negotiate in the event for his previous club that he does come out and does prove himself to be extremely valuable, or on the flip side for for RGV / the Dynamo to negotiate the other way if he comes out and he struggles a bit? Do you know if there's room for that, or is it just we have set the price to buy?
Yeah, I actually have not asked about that and don't know about that. It's an interesting thing I can follow up with next time I'm over there. But
okay.
You would hope that there's some wiggle room, right? Because he should have some ability to determine that based on how well he plays and what he contributes.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is actually in MLS, and most fans don't know this, but in MLS, when a player is signed or a player is brought in on a loan to buy or a loan with an option to buy, that option price is actually set at the moment of the loan. Now, a club can technically negotiate, and usually will to some extent, but usually that number is pretty well set, pretty close to what they're going to end up with. So I'd just be curious if it was, because considering this is technically a USL signing, I'd be curious to know if they treat that any different or not, just because I do know from the MLS side how they treat that. So, Greg, I'm giving you homework.
Yeah, glad to do it.
There's actually another question that came up in social media a couple of weeks ago, and hopefully you're able to have an answer to this one. But we know that Brandon Morales is an RGVFC academy, and he debuted. He signed a first team contract a couple of weeks ago with the Toros. Do you know, Greg, for sure, if in the case that RGV sell Brandon Morales to another team, does that money, is that with RGV or is that the Dynamo that's going to be handling those negotiations?
Well, So the way those contracts work in general, this applies to Brandon and this applies to actually Omar Cabrera Jr. as well. To maintain their NCAA eligibility, they're not actually paid. They're just sort of signed to the club to be members of the club to be able to play as anybody else would. But they don't necessarily have a paying contract. I mean, they can't make any money or else they wouldn't be able to go to school.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they're even eligible for transfer or anything like that, just because of the terms of that kind of an agreement.
Okay, yeah, it's a good thing you bring that up, and I'll post that on social media later on, because that way we can since they want to meet, I'm assuming, the NCAA requirements.
Yeah, the NSCAA requirements specify that the player cannot make money from any professional activities or any semi-professional activities, which would include RGV. It's interesting because actually that makes me wonder if once Wilmer Cabrera Jr. and once Morales are out of school, if they continue with RGV for, let's say, another 1 to 2 years after this would be interesting to find out. And the Dynamo then call them up, or then sign them to a MLS contract. I would imagine the Dynamo would not ask for a transfer fee, or would hope to not have to ask for a transfer fee. But would there be any transfer fee involved in that?
And I think that's a question that in the end wanted to be asked. Are they?
Yeah. Who does the player technically
belong
reside
to-
with in terms of from a contractual standpoint? Are they contracted directly with RGV, or are they contracted with the Dynamo and then happen to be playing for RGV?
Yeah, especially in the future with any future RGVFC Academy players that come out of the system.
Well, especially if, let's say, 5 to 10 years down the road, if the relationship is to the point that Dynamo have a second USL team, a team in D3 and RGV, and they're starting to pull players from RGV, moving players from the D3 to RGV. There's a lot of questions that start to come up when you start to think through that entire process of the eligibility of players, of the ownership of players, so to speak. And so I know, Greg, that's a tall ask for you, so we're not asking you to find all of that out, because that'd be incredible. But I'd be interested to pick the brain of whoever is really managing contracts there, if that is Matt Jordan here or Nick Calba here or whoever, to pick their brain here to find out. I'd be curious how they're doing that, because I think there's a lot of insight to be had from that aspect. That unfortunately is very difficult to get, because unlike in MLS, where they do have certain requirements over certain transparency, in USL there's no requirement. It's if the club desires to release it, they release it. Otherwise, they don't have to.
Mm-hmm. And does yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say my intuition would be that they'd be signed with RGV rather than with Houston, just because practically it does not appear likely that they would need to be in Houston or play for Houston at any time in the near future. So just from a sheer practicality standpoint, it seems like they would handle that all here, but I don't know for sure. It's a good question.
And Greg, just that's about exactly where I stand on things. Like, it would make the most sense for the player to be signed by RGV to RGV, but at the same time, because of the relationship, that question does exist, and it would be good just to find out, are they truly RGV players? And like you said, I mean, they're signing really a contract to play, not a contract to be paid, because they're collegiate players. So, that throws in another wrench in the works that makes things a little bit different for them. So, there's a lot of things to consider that I know most fans don't even really think about at all.
And this just continues to muddy up that water of like how this relationship works.
Yeah.
Because we always talk about, Dynamo handle all the technical aspects, handle all the player salaries, player contracts, things like that. And then this comes up, and then there's this duality. Okay, is it the Dynamo's property per se, or RGV's signings?
Well, it becomes even more interesting because with MLS, players that are on MLS contracts, so your Eric Bird, your Connor Donovans, they are technically owned by MLS. MLS owns the rights to those players, not the teams. The teams are then contract with MLS to pay those salaries. Yes, exactly. So then you start to really get into some muddy waters, because then it's, if these players are signed by the Dynamo, are they then also part of the MLS system, or is it that they're signed with RGV so the Dynamo don't even have to deal with that? So as you can see, Greg, there's a whole lot of gears currently turning in my head when it comes to this stuff. It's because there's so many levels and layers of this onion
And
that
Luke Hill.
that really needs to be peeled
Yeah.
back. That you start diving down that rabbit hole, and suddenly you're in a totally different, ballpark than what you thought you were going to be at, type thing. I mean, it can get really crazy.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it now that you mentioned that everybody signed with the MLS, the whole Generation Adidas thing. And I know I talked to Wilmer Jr. this week, and he said one of his goals was to potentially land that kind of a contract opportunity.
Yeah.
So that just sort of implies to me that he would not be able to be contracted with MLS before that.
Correct.
I don't know exactly how the rules for draft entry or age requirements work or whatever it may be, but
Yeah.
obviously that system with the Generation Adidas exists for a reason. So I think that entering is probably more complicated than that,
Yeah,
and that's why they
well,
must not be now.
Yeah, and let's compound the issue with academy players. Academy players are, can be homegrowns, but don't have to be Generation Adidas players, and typically aren't Generation Adidas players. So there's a whole other caveat to the caveat of contracts. So like I said, it's truly a rabbit hole when you start diving into the actual contract rules and things like that. And I just know it from the MLS standpoint, from the number of years that I've been researching and diving into it. But I shed a tear to think what the USL levels and layers of the onion are, because I know how deep it goes with MLS, and USL probably isn't quite so deep, but then again, you think about it, and they've probably got a lot more loopholes because they probably don't keep as tighter restrictions on certain things, like allowing players to sign contracts where they're not actually being paid, but they're still able to play because they want to maintain their NSCAA eligibility, whereas in MLS, that can't be the case. Once a player signs a contract with
You're a
MLS,
professional.
you are now a professional. You are no longer allowed to play collegiate ball. And that is why Lucatero, initially when he was with the Dynamo Academy, when he was 18, 19, he wanted to sign the contract. He went and played for Oregon State, so he could not sign his homegrown contract with Houston. Then he signed his homegrown contract with Houston, was unable to play for Oregon State, then was sent to RGV, and that's how that whole thing kind of came about. But it's just very interesting, and there are MLS clubs that have been doing this a lot longer, that have a lot more experience with that whole process, and it's just interesting to get Greg's insight on it, and have the opportunity to get Greg's insight on it for sure, because it's just a totally different side of the coin.
Then definitely. Jacob?
Yeah, it's crazy when you get into those contract things, just like Sean said, because I've been following college ball, any type of college sports, for a while, and I know that when you sign a college contract, no matter what, it constantly states you're an amateur, you're an amateur, you're an amateur. You cannot earn money, things like that. And then the other thing is, of course, now with all the, all the signings, it's just going to be an interesting thing.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that's gonna come to light more in the next few seasons as we continue to see that growth and continue to see that development and continue to see those barriers and bridges being spanned, and we get to the point where we actually start to see some of those super young players that are coming up through, whether it's the RGV system or the Dynamo Academy system, as the case may be, and then they make their way to RGV, and then they make their way to the Dynamo, or if they go from RGV to another club and make their way up, those little things start to come out. You start to learn and get the transparency into some of those things, and so it's just interesting. It's just such a, like I said, it's a deep rabbit hole that could take a full hour on its own to start to peel back the layers and start to think through and figure out. And
a lot of research.
Oh man, so many hours devoted to that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Greg, what have you heard as far as the RGV Academy? Have you asked around what the status is so far on the academy?
I don't think it would be affected by the change. I think that everything that they have in place is, I don't think that any of those people are changing, the people who run the academy or who coach the academy or like that. So hopefully that would be able to continue as normal. To get back to the front office stuff, I think the thing that they're hoping going forward is that the sponsorships and the advertising will largely sell themselves based on the brand names that have been built and the agreements that are already in place. And in terms of the thing that I was most curious about is those Liga MX matches and the other special attractions that come here sometimes that help build the profile for the venue and for the league and for the team. A few of those are still in place for all the way through next year. So that's something that it's going to be interesting to see how they try to do that without Bert, who was having a lot of those conversations and driving those events to come here. But it's not a problem that they're going to have to face in the immediate future. The thing that I think is most interesting with the changeover that we haven't touched on yet is the fact that so many of these people started out when it was the Vipers organization, and that was their primary responsibility. And then you sort of add the Toros to the mix, which is a whole other team. It essentially doubles what you have to do. And I don't think the staff doubled. I just think that people had to start working a lot harder and had to split their time differently. And you hear the stories about how the section of the year where their seasons cross over, how many days in a row that they work to try to make everything work. So that comes from a culture of having started in at the ground floor, and then you build up and you get used to working that hard and having to do those things to make ends meet and to get your organization to progress. But as you bring in the new people, and especially a bunch of new people at the same time, does that culture persist? And are they still willing to put in those hours? And if not, how does that impact the organization in the long term? That's impossible to know. For all we know, the next people they find could be wildly talented and could take the organization to the next level, or it could slide back and be difficult to keep up the level that they've been at. So that all remains to be seen, but that's just, from my perspective, what I'm going to be looking out for is just the attitude of the people they find and if they're able to keep up the work ethic that existed with the group before.
And one more question, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, and that's okay if you don't, but do you have a sense of is RGV looking for more or less, and specifically talking about the Toros, are they looking more or less for soccer-specific people, or are they looking for sports business-specific people that maybe have some experience in soccer or that don't have any experience in soccer, or do you even know at this point?
I do not know at this point, but I believe that everything I've gathered is that it's still going to be a joint position that worries about the Vipers and the Toros simultaneously. So you'd have to find somebody ideally who had experience in both, and if not that, one or the other, or had done something similar that they think they can handle all of that. But I don't believe, this conversation is being had right now, and they're changing their minds that initially planned to split it into two positions or to find somebody soccer specific.
Okay, I was just curious. It was just something that popped in my head.
Jacob, you have any questions for Greg?
Yeah, I mean, Sean basically said my question there because I was also curious about that too. Because, I mean, you and I, Edson, have also talked on this subject before, and we've constantly said we need two divisions, one to cover the soccer side and one to cover the basketball side or the Vipers side, really, because we had seen how it kind of was struggling in a way, that a lot of them pushed their way towards more of the Vipers and cared more towards that, especially given the fact that we opened up Burt Ogden Arena. And it's interesting how they're going to take it. I really do hope that it ends up becoming two divisions and not just one.
Yeah, I think both organizations would benefit with having, maybe not like, I think like what Greg Lucas said, having some people that are specific to the soccer, that have a lot of experience in soccer business operations and basketball business operations on either side, to help out all the others that are below, that are doing both organizations, to kind of get an idea as to, okay, so this is how the soccer aspect must be run, and whenever you're going to be focusing on the Toros, we're going to have to do this, lead the marketing, because obviously the marketing for the G League and for basketball in general is much different environment, and I hate you, Microsoft, to soccer. Especially with the culture, there's a huge difference in culture between basketball and soccer.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because as Greg was talking, and actually as Jacob was talking as well, I started to think about that, and that relationship between the Vipers and the front office of the Vipers and the Toros kind of reminds me of the relationship between the Dynamo and Dash front offices, in that there are still people, positions that serve both simultaneously. But that over time, and initially when the Dash started, 95% of their front office was Dynamo positions that were also working Dash. But as time has gone on, they've filled those positions with Dash specific people. Not all of them. There's still probably 25-30% that aren't Dash specific. But you look at the media and communications, for instance, those are Dash specific now. You look at ticketing, and that's a lot of those are Dash specific. Although the ticket reps are not, but there's actually individuals that are specific to the Dash. And so I find it interesting to hear those things, same kind of comments and thoughts and processes happening on the RGV side, because we just went through that, on the women's soccer side with the Dash not all that long ago. And I can tell you that there's light at the end of the tunnel, because once you make it through that process and you do end up with, one or two, specific people to what you're trying to do, it's a lot better than everybody working both sides. So that can be a very big benefit overall for RGV and the Toros in the long run, and really the Vipers too.
I think it just kind of depends. In a lot of ways, it's just like the most basic business discussion is, the fewer people you pay, the easier it is to make a profit then, right? Because you have lower expenses. So that was the thought process when the Toro started, is if we can just get the same people to do twice the work, then it'll be easier to be profitable. And I think there's some aspects of it that make sense. Do you need somebody to be selling sponsorships or advertising for the Toros and then have somebody else selling sponsorships and advertising for the Vipers, or does it make more sense and make easier life to do those together?
Absolutely.
I think, it just helps to have more people, but then that just comes down to what are your overall operating expenses in a minor league sports environment. It's never, nobody ever has as many people as they want. I wish I had some more writers here, like everybody wants more of whatever they're doing. But that's just kind of, you have to try to find a way to make it work.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense.
And I think as far as the sponsorship division of the Toros, or of HEB Park, I don't know who, I think they've done a decent job of acquiring not only enough distributors, but I know that recently they got General Mills at the stadium as well. And you're talking about a big national corporation sponsoring. Well, you're looking at me like.
No, it wasn't that. I'm just thinking to myself, can we bring a couple of those guys up to the Dynamo? Because boy, they really could use a sponsor for their freaking kit right now.
Well,
it's only been a year.
Well, to be fair, our shirt sponsor is Alonso Cantu's business, so
that's still more than the Dynamo have right now.
Well,
I'm just saying, man. Just saying.
So, Greg, before we go, do you have any additional topics you want to discuss in regards to the Toros, whether it's front office or the actual team?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you mentioned Kane too. I think you would be remiss to not talk about his role in this. And having someone with his wealth and influence in the Valley makes it a lot easier to sustain these organizations through a change like this. I mean, you ask anybody, and just, things that he's involved with tend to not fail. And especially a project like this, if it takes a loss or if it suffers for a couple of years, that's not really hurting him in the big picture. I mean, everybody involved is invested in making it work. But by the same token, he is capable of sustaining a loss on this and keeping the organization going if he wants to. Mm-hmm. So I think from the front office perspective, that's the last note I wanted to make. I think we've covered it pretty well. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on the field as well. I actually thought the first half they played against Swope Park, even without scoring, was one of the best halves they've played all year. But that's, that we go down a whole other rabbit hole if we start talking about tactics and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. But so one quick question, and we talked because we talked about Alonso Cantu. So right now, at this moment, it's just ownership group is just Alonso Cantu, or are there other investors right now that have become a part of the organization that you know of?
He is the primary owner, but it is an ownership group, and I couldn't tell you all the people involved in that, but it's he has the biggest say in everything, and is, I believe, the majority owner of the Vipers for sure, and I believe of the Toros as well. So he's basically the guy.
Okay, yeah, I know there's been a couple of questions regarding that in social media as well. Well, more than anything because of this whole talk about independence. But as you saw in that video which we started, If we go independent, we lose everything. In the technical aspect, we lose scouts, we lose coaches, we lose players. Except for we don't lose the academy, but that's pretty much about it.
Yeah.
Because other than that, we'd have to start everything from scratch. So just be careful what you wish for.
Exactly.
So, Greg, we really appreciate you coming on the show. I think you brought a lot of information that hopefully the fans that are listening to us, not only right now in the live stream, but on the podcast with the Beautiful Game Network, would really appreciate. We kind of get a better idea how this organization was ran with Bert Garcia, and what can we expect with this transition from the Bert Garcia era to the new president's era. It will be interesting to see, like we said, how long it takes to get his replacement and what ideas his replacement brings to the table to the Vipers and the Toros.
So, Greg, are we going to make this a monthly thing where you and I hop on down in the valley and just confiscate their entire first hour? Is that what we're going to do every month?
Yeah. I could get on board with that plan, especially since you've given me some homework to do. I'll come better prepared next time.
Awesome. Book it, Dano. Book it.
Definitely, man. Well, thank you, Greg, and we're looking forward to next month having you on, hopefully with some better news.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys having me.
Thanks, Greg. Again, appreciate it, man.
Have a good night.
I'm stepping out too.
All right, Sean. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, Jacob, what did you think?
Yeah, a lot of things that basically got answered in a way that we really needed to get answered, especially kind of new on that aspect that if RGVFC's plan really was to go solo, then it would be a plump, obviously, because we'd lose everything, just like you said, or basically everything.
Yes.
All the players and just, that whole mess. And that was just also half of the fact. And then the other fact is who's going to replace who. Of course, we don't have the answers just yet for that, but it would be nice, obviously, to know soon. And a lot more on the Carlos Small situation. It was really nice to know a lot more than we had.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the things, I mentioned it to Sean, and I think I mentioned it to you guys in the chat, was that it seemed like the coverage for Carlos Small kind of went under the radar. I felt with him coming in, the details to it, but I think that all that has to do with the organization releasing those details to the media. I mean, the reason I found out about a little bit of the details from his loan was through the Panamanian media. And I know they're pretty hyped up over there in Panama about the future of Carlos Small here with RGVFC. I actually saw a couple of tweets, where they shared the link to the game against Swope Park Rangers, talking about like, okay, if you guys want to see how Carlos Small new team plays, here's the link to the live link, the YouTube one, to the game. And I can assume that there were a couple of Panamanians that were following the Toros at that game. So now you have that. So now you have Guatemalans tuning in for Pablo Aguilar, which they are a lot. And I can tell you that. We have now Panamanians. We have Kiwis, New Zealanders, however you want to call the people of New Zealand, due to Kyle Adams. And obviously the people of RGV. So you have a little bit of an international outreach with the Toros that I think that the organization, hopefully the new administration, would be able to take advantage of when it comes to their marketing and things like that. I think there's a lot of potential with having these international players coming in, especially players who have a future with their national team. And I think with Pablo Aguilar and with Carlos Small, that's exactly the kind of players that we have. We have potential. We have players that have the potential to be in the senior national team And I know Carlos Small had, I believe, like 1 or 2 games with the senior Panamanian national team. I don't think he played. He played much, but we know he has potential. The fans know he has potential in Panama, and they, from what I've, like I said, from what I've talked about with on social media, I mean, they have positive things to say about Carlos Small. So we hope for the best in this with this signing, hopefully. And what I've been told, not only from what Greg Lucas said, but that yeah, he is really close to actually start on Saturday against Colorado Springs Switchbacks. And another quick detail that he did tell me is that apparently, at least in practice, looks like he's getting along really well with Aldo and with Chuy.
I mean, it makes sense for you to get become friends with Chuy, because Chuy just seems like a great guy all around. He seems really friendly and seems like a guy that would instantly be able to just talk to you and get you situated. And of course, Aldo as well. He's kind of an underdog. I hear a lot from him through social media, and especially things like that. We only hear through him basically on game day. And so he's one of those more serious guys that wants to do well for the team and wants to get people in. And that just talks about how much this team wants to succeed. Especially we've been to interviews with Chuy Enriquez after the game, and we know how upset he gets when the team's not performing well and when he's not performing well. So you get those players that are really mature, you're going to have a better time. If you're that type of person, you're going to have a much better time getting more and more situated than if, let's say, you were or the team was totally different.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think Aldo Quintanilla, he's, like you say, he's more of a serious kind of guy, but it's probably more than anything because, he's not really much of a social media user. I mean, he's got Instagram, he's got Twitter, but he doesn't really use them much. But I mean, if you see Chuy Enriquez's Instagram, like his story, Aldo Quintanilla he's a pretty fun guy. He's pretty funny and things like that. I mean, I've talked to Aldo Quintanilla a couple of times as well, and he's pretty down to earth, and he's willing to get to work to get the job done when it is required. After all, he is also looking for that opportunity to move up to the Houston Dynamo, and that's his goal. That's Chuy Enriquez's goal, and a couple other players in the Toros roster. So that's really a good thing to have that motivation in order to get this team off of this slump that we can't seem to get out of definitively, but they're not content with what they're doing so far, even though a lot of people say, well, this team doesn't play like a 16th place team, but they're not content with that. They want to get the 3 points, and that's what they're looking for. So we're going to go on a quick little break. When we come back, we will start talking about what happened at Children's Mercy Park between Swope Park Rangers and the Toros. Also, we will kind of talk a little bit on the preview for this Saturday's match at HEB Park between the Toros and the Colorado Springs Switchbacks. So don't go away just yet. We still got we got one more hour to go on this show, and we will be back in about 5 minutes.
You wanna turn me off. You wanna flip the switch. I wanna break the lock. I know what makes you tick. We used to be so young and free. Yeah, baby, don't treat me like a machine. I could still be just what you need. No, baby, don't treat me like a machine. Wanna go to your apartment, take it back to where we started. We'll be everything you wanted, you wanted, you wanted. And I know it could be perfect, and I know it would be worth it. We'll be everything you wanted. You want it, you want it. You want it, you want it. It's driving us apart. The way we never speak. I'll fix your broken parts and make you feel complete. We used to be so young and free. Yeah, baby, don't treat me like a machine. I could still be just what you need. No, baby, don't treat me like a machine. We used to be so young and free. Yeah, baby, don't treat me like a machine. I could still be just what you need. No, baby, don't treat me like a machine. Wanna go to your apartment, take it back to where we started. We'll be everything you wanted, you wanted, you wanted. And I know it could be perfect, and I know it would be worth it. We'll be everything you wanted, you wanted, you wanted. Wanted, 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 you wanted, 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 you wanted, 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 you wanted. You want it, you want it. You want it, you want it. You want it, you want it.
Welcome back, everybody, to the second hour of the Down in the Valley podcast. I'm sorry, my eyes kind of hurting a little, but anyways, we're back for the second hour. Jacob, and last weekend, oh, we got Ray coming in. How you doing, Ray?
Hey, how you doing there tonight? I thought you were going to have Greg for all both hours.
Well, we kind of touched base on almost all of the questions that we had so far. I thought so too, but I think he eloquently answered the questions that he knew the answers to in regards to the this change in the organization and all the other questions that came up, whether it was the one that was mentioned here on Glenn Davis's show here in Houston, regards to the future RGVFC and anything. So I think I was definitely pleased with Greg Lucas' participation today on the show.
Yeah, I was expecting both hours, to be honest with you.
Yeah, same here. But you know, we're going to be talking today, right now, on the match that happened on Saturday versus Soul Park Rangers. So,
Yeah.
Jacob, what were your thoughts before this match?
My thoughts before this match was kind of, well, I'd seen, obviously everyone had seen what RGBFC that started before the Boat Park game for sure, where they won 1-0, and it was a fantastic, or excuse me, 2-0 because of that late goal by Chewy. And they looked really well throughout that whole entire game. I was thinking kind of a bit of the same. A draw on the road so we had gotten 3 points wasn't going to be terrible, but we just needed to play our hearts out throughout that whole 90 minutes in Kansas City.
Yeah, definitely. Right?
Well, just judging by the starting 11 that was put out there, I was glad to see Wenger back, and I was glad to see Eric Bird back in uniform. I was hoping that we would come up with the 3 points, but obviously we had to condition two of the Dynamo players to get them some match fitness, especially with Andrew Wenger only playing 45 minutes. And then the notable drop-off came when Kai Green was subbed in, and you could just tell that the Swole Park was just looking for that final push.
Yeah, definitely, and it's one of the things that I was discussing with a couple of guys here in Houston in regards to Andrew Wenger, the quality that he has. I mean, MLS quality, not only winger, but also had proven himself before his injury that he was more than capable of playing in the right back position as well. And he showed some of his quality that in this game against Swole Park Rangers, not only in the defense, but also helping out in the attack. And you mentioned it in the second half when Kai Green was brought in, you saw that huge quality difference between both of these players. RGV stopped attacking in the second half. I mean, it wasn't until almost to when we got to stoppage time when RGV actually had some shots on goal, some opportunities. I mean, I think one of the stat was that, and they mentioned it on the broadcast, was I think in the first half, RGV had 10 shots on and in the second half, up until the point where it's probably got like 82nd minute around there, they had nothing. They completely lost their footing.
Absolutely, and
also,
go ahead, Jacob.
Oh, thanks. It's still Kansas City, Kansas, and not to mention that game was at 4 p.m. Central Time, which, yes, it's not in the heat of the day that comes from there. It's not like this place is enclosed here at Children's Mercy Park. No, it's wide open. And yes, RGVFC should be used to that because of the fact that they play down here where the temperatures are getting around the same temps that Kansas City is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but
definitely.
It just, yes, and those late minutes, who it is, you're going to have problems.
Yeah, you do have a point there. It just seemed like it was tired leg. And right at the end with the heat, I know they had water breaks there as well, and I know even up in Kansas there was the heat wave was still pretty much apparent. Not as bad as how it's been here in Texas the last couple of days, but for what the region is usually used to, it was pretty hot up there. And so, but the point I'm trying to make is that like even in the beginning of the second half, Kai Green just doesn't have the same characteristics of Andrew Wenger, obviously, because they're both technically playing different leagues. But going back to preseason, where it was said that Kai Green was trying out for the Dynamo and was sent back, and what we heard is Wilmer Cabrera just felt that he wasn't ready for MLS play level or the MLS play style. And it just goes to show you right here how even an MLS player that is technically not a right back, it was able to outperform.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it just goes to show that sometimes some of these players that we have down here, maybe they just need to break out of that inner shell that they have and maybe have a few breakout games and get into actual fit form to give a little bit competition to the players up in Houston for a potential call-up.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely, because you never know when the Dynamo might need something from the Toros. I mean, it's just I really understand, and it doesn't help that Kai Green has not been played a lot of minutes this season. Way less minutes that was originally predicted by a lot of people, including the USL. When they did the whole list of players to look out for this season, one of them, if I'm not mistaken, was Kai Green. And
Yep, because he's I guess you could kind of say like faces of the franchise type of deal.
yes,
Someone who has been there, done that type of deal, and then you also have the same ordeal with Jorginho James.
yeah, and well, I believe Jorginho James is here on a loan, but it was just renewed for this next season. But it just goes to show that this new blood that has been brought in on the defensive side has done their job. Sheldon Sullivan, Connor Donovan, Kyle Adams, Manny Padilla, even Omar Ontiveros. What's his name? The other guy.
Aldo Quintanilla.
I'm talking on the defensive side, but yes, Aldo Quintanilla has also shown up in the attack that he's willing to continuously work hard to try to achieve some results. Chuy Enriquez, without a doubt, I think the only veteran that I can assure you had a veteran with RGV has consistently shown that he's ready to be that leader. Obviously, is our captain Todd Warden, because I mean Kai has been on a slump, and then Jorginho has also been on a slump. And I'm being told, hey, he's very inconsistent, yada yada. A couple of matches, especially in the beginning of matches, Jorginho James would lose easy passes, easy balls in the midfield that would leave our defense a little bit vulnerable. I believe we mentioned about that in the match against Santos, the match against Las Vegas Lights. And so, if you as a central defensive midfield, you're responsible for that transition between defense and attack. And if you have your defenders, kind of already positioning themselves to, for the attack, and you lose the ball real easily, and you leave your defense really exposed for the counter. And I believe we've had a couple of goals scored against us in that matter, especially in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, that's exactly the way that this game kind of, that stuff was fantastic. We had chance after chance, but that second half was it was sloppy for sure. We gave up easy passes, I noticed, and Swope Park were able to counter on us. And what I mean by that is, especially when they'd get into the last 30 yards or so, 40 to 30 yards, close to the box, they would be able to get in basically, and they took shots. I'm very happy that RGVFC came away with 1 point, because it could have been very different to where they could have lost that one single point, because a couple of balls, if I'm not mistaken, from SKC hit the post at the end of the game.
And I mean, we had a couple of opportunities in the first half. I mean, I know Pablo Aguilar's volley hit the post as well, and there was, I think, there were a couple of opportunities in the second half with Aldo Quintanilla coming in, where just the shot just didn't have a lot of power in it to try to defeat the goalkeeper. So basically, this was the starting 11 for that match for the Toros. We had Nico Cordy as the goalkeeper. We had Andrew Wenger as right back, Sheldon Sullivan left back, Connor Donovan and Omar Ontiveros playing in the center back positions. Todd Warden and Nicolas Perea and Eric Bird, as well as Wilmer Cabrera Jr. In the midfield, and up on top you had Pablo Aguilar just a little bit behind Jordan Jones. And then in the second half, like we mentioned, in the 45th minute, Kai Green came for Andrew Wenger. And then you had Kyle Adams coming in for Omar Ontiveros, who I believe injured himself in that match. And I believe he cramped up, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I mean, I believe he cramped up. Yes.
Yeah, because I believe it was. I think they took advantage of that to go into their water break, and then when they came back from the water break, that's when they announced the substitution, Kyle Adams coming in for Omar Tiveros, and that pretty much wasted I don't want to say wasted because it sounds really harsh, but we had to use a substitution in the defense that could have easily been used to put in a Bryce Marion on the attack and kind of give a little some energy to the attack for the end of this match. But I mean, it's an injury. You can't really plan for that. And then in the 57th minute, you had Wilmer Cabrera Jr. Being subbed off for Aldo Quintanilla. I think what has surprised me is the fact that Wilmer Cabrera Jr. has been getting minutes with the RGVFC first team.
That's been a big key, but you go back to having a cramp and almost having to sub kind of earlier than expected, changing the tactics basically for Jerson. It reminds me of, I believe, 2014 when the Netherlands were in the World Cup. And when it came into extra time and they knew that they had an extra sub and they knew that they could put in this goalkeeper that was specialized for penalties when they knew it was going to penalties, and ended up swapping him out or swapping the keeper out for that, it's kind of exactly in that sort of sense. Maybe if Bryce Marion had gotten subbed in that late in the game, it could have most likely made this crazy spark to help get a goal late in this game where RGVFC that late in the game looked sloppy. So it goes back and forth at putting. No one knows if he was a big problem for RGVFC or not a huge problem, but it could have benefited instead of hurting.
Definitely. So, just want to take the time right now to say hi to a couple of people that are on that were on the chat. Obviously, Carson, you're welcome to the stream, man. It's been a while, but like I said, you're always welcome. He actually made a comment in regards to Kai Green. He says, in fairness, Kai was calling for the ball and seemed willing to make runs. Sheldon Sullivan is who appears to be trapped into the defensive half. I believe. Okay, hold on.
That's a fair assessment.
I don't know. Okay, so he brings up that Bryce Marion wasn't even called up. And the reason I say this is because I swear that in the ESPN Plus app, Bryce Marion was on the bench. That's why I mentioned Bryce Marion, but he wasn't even called up. Hashtag ESPN Plus. But or maybe it was just me kind of being dumb. But it's been a long day. But anyways, thank you, Carson, for clearing that up. I do see that right here in the USL website that and the available substitutes where Matt Sanchez, Chuy Enriquez, Jorge, actually forgive me. I meant to say Chuy Enriquez, not Bryce Marion. Chuy Enriquez. That's the player that I was like really wanted to see him come in. I feel like this was his match that fit his characteristics, but that needed substitution for Omar Ontiveros kind of ruined it. But then you also had Jorginho James and
It's kind
Matias
of changed the
Saldívar.
tactics that coach wanted to play out.
Say again?
It kind of changed the tactic that how coach wanted to play it out with the subs, just due to injury.
Yes, yes, definitely, and we've seen it in the past couple of games where he's playing this new formation, this new roster, these new players that are starting in the starting 11, and then when the other team is tired, you bring in these players like Chuy Enriquez and Bryce Marion, to take advantage of that advantage that the other team, the other defenders, are tired, especially out in the heat. Yeah, then Carson says, I was hoping for him to enter as well. Told my wife I wanted him in for Wilmer Jr. Honestly, I think that the substitution for between Aldo Quintanilla and Wilmer Jr. I think it was the right call, but I feel that if they could have changed out maybe Jordan Jones for Chuy Enriquez, going back to that 4-2-3-1 formation. I think it would have seen a bigger benefit, especially with the fact that Chuy and Aldo are starting to get some better chemistry between them.
Yeah, most definitely. And like I said about Bryce Marion before we knew that he wasn't even called up, I mean, the same goes for Chewy right there. If Chewy gets subbed in, he can make this extra spark to help maybe RGBFC for a something that
We're losing you, Jacob.
actually, like you said, he now has this.
We're losing
Sorry
you,
about that.
Jacob. Okay.
But
Go
kind
ahead.
of like you said,
Oh, we lost him.
Chuy Enriquez.
Hold on. Let me go ahead and let me
I
call
said
you
for
back
that.
because I think we're losing you. Let me call you back. Hold on. Sorry about that, guys. Hashtag technology, and at the beginning it was some audio issues, and now there we go. Jacob.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. What were you mentioning about Chuy Enriquez?
Well, like I said, or tried to say before all this stuff happened, especially the same goes for Chewy, like I said, for Bryce Marion. He could have given this team an extra spark if they were, because we all know, especially now, that he has gotten this kind of bond with Aldo Quintanilla. And why I say that is because they've made a couple of passes that have led to goals lately this season. What we call last week's game, or not last week, so the week before last, when we got that win. I believe it was a tree of that nature, something or other. My point is, he could have brought this extra spark that we didn't have before.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that. So just a couple of quick stats from this match, which I'm sure you'll find interesting. Swell Park Rangers had 3 offsides. You had 6 corners for each team. Possession was pretty close. It was pretty equal. 51% for the Toros, 49% for Swell Park Rangers. Now, in regards to the lineup for Swell Park Rangers, and we talked about this last week's episode, that are the 2 players that we really had to look out for were obviously Carlton Belmar and Haji Berry. And Carlton Belmar looked really, 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 really good out there. He looked really dangerous at times, and I think there were some times where it looked like, I think even the commentators mentioned it, like it didn't even look like he was tired even at the end of the match.
Ray, I'm going to let you start with this one.
Yeah, Belmar was struggling against Andrew Wagner a little bit during the match, just based on what I was able to see. And then the second half, once Ty Green came on, it's like he literally had his way with Ty as far as getting a little bit more involved in Swole Park's attack a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there were a couple of instances in the match where Carlton Belmar switched to the right side of the field, and tried to look for some connection with, if I'm not mistaken, it was Felipe Hernandez, or with Brian Rebellion, who actually had a couple opportunities as well. Brian Rebellion.
Yeah, exactly. And thankfully, both of them were shots that Cordy was able to handle, and the defense was able to do its part to ease it up for Corty as well.
And I think one of the opportunities, it wasn't really a shot from him, it was a pass. It was a beautiful pass that Rebellion sent out to, I believe it was Tyler Blackwood, and it put him in a really advantageous position in front of Nico Corti, but his first touch was a little bit too heavy to be able to just control the ball and move around Nico Corti to just slot it inside. And so we were really lucky that opportunity didn't become a goal. But it's just that Brian Rebellion showed that vision, that finesse to put the ball where it needed to be placed, to give his teammate an advantage. Some other stats here. I want to see. Okay. Oh, crossing accuracy. Okay, this one's interesting. Crossing accuracy for the Toros, 52.9%. Crossing accuracy for Swole Park, 7.7.
Wow.
I don't think I've ever seen a number that low for crossing.
Yeah, that was really that number is really shocking just in general, because I didn't really think that crossing for them was that bad.
Yeah, me either. But then again, it was, I think, one of the better opportunities came in the second half with Rebellion. But I think they also count any crossing opportunities that are blocked by the defender that's marking them, and I think that also counts as a cross when it comes to their accuracy. Here's another stat. You're going to be surprised. Shooting accuracy for the Toros, 38.9%. For Swole Park Rangers, 14.3%.
I mean, both numbers aren't great, but one number's better than the other somehow.
Okay, so here's another. So you're talking about that 14.3% is in a total of 7 shots. Out of those 7 shots, only one was on target for the Swole Park Rangers. For the Toros, they had 18 shots, 7 of them were on target, and I can assume that most of them were in the first half.
Yeah, but look at that, 18 shots. So RGVFC, you're talking about RGVFC being able to get through a pretty difficult defense, but not, once again, having the problem of putting shots on target. So that's a very frustrating thing to get through, when we just talked about a week before RGVFC having that thing figured out. So we can't really just have a Jorginho game, if you get what I'm kind of saying here, where it's on and off, inconsistent. So that just cannot happen. We need to be in full force.
Yeah, definitely. What's up, Jacob? How are you doing? Jacob from the Stampede. He's watching us right now. He says, hopefully Derek doesn't take too much playing time from Cordy and Nelson, and to keep it up, shout out from the Stampede. Thanks a lot, Jacob. For that shout out, and hope you enjoy the rest of this episode. So here's the thing. So we've seen, and I want y'all to be blunt and say what you really feel. Do you really think that Wilmer Cabrera Jr. is ready to be a starter for this team? Ray, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, man. Age is such an important factor. A substitute, yes, not a regular starter. Here's why. The age and the way the speed of this game is played compared to what his age level is, maybe he might be mature for his age level, but I just see him coming on as a sub. So, no.
Jacob?
For me, I say a sub right now, but for the future, a starter. Why do I say that? Look at players like, I'm going to say this guy, Alphonso Davies, for example, because he's in that same age group as Cabrera Jr. here. Alphonso Davies just signed for Bayern Munich. Most likely will play on the bench for them, but he played for the Whitecaps, got subbed in his first time when he was 16, and was with the first team, is my point, for a while, and started 22 caps when he was about 16 years of age. Now he's 17 and he's playing for Bayern. My point being, this man has growth, and of course he might not have that exact talent that Alfonso has, but for sure, for an MLS standpoint, just let him just basically get him ready to become that star for at most the Toros, and or not at least the Toros, and at most or Houston.
I definitely have to agree with you. We have to find a balance between when is he talented enough to get minutes, and the fact that we have to start him young and
There's no
for them to
question on
get.
the talent, Edson.
No, well, okay,
There's no question on the talent.
no. Let me go ahead and explain what I mean by that. And that is because right now, kind of leaving the Tours for a little bit, there's this huge debate in Mexico in regards to that and to young talent. And so a lot of people say, well, maybe a lot of teams don't put their youngsters until they're like 22, 23 in the first team. And the question, the thing with Wilmer Cabrera Jr. is, so you have to find this balance. Whether is he good enough to play as starter to get minutes in the first team with the Toros, or does he still need some development? You have to find that balance, because if you debut him and get him experience too late in his age, you're going to stunt his development. But at the same time, you can't really debut him too early, because you're just going to expose him. Now, right now, I personally believe, just like the rest of you, I think he can be a good substitute. But I think when he started, I mean, he gets the job done. But right now, he's not much of a standout compared to what Aldo Quintanilla has been. Granted, Aldo Quintanilla is 22, 23. He's got a lot more experience with Liga, the under 23 teams with Gallos Blancos de Querétaro. But at this, it's good that he's getting minutes. But you also have to see that, Aldo right now is in a better position to be a starter for this team. I think we may see Wilmer Cabrera Jr. maybe be ready to be a starter and be, I guess you can say, stand up more as a starter maybe by mid-season next year, if he continues to get some of these squad rotation minutes. Like I said, he's done his job. Like he gets the job done for what he does, but he's really one of those players right now, because of he's barely getting minutes, that kind of flies under the radar. So he's off to a good start. So it's promising for him, especially and also with the fact, like Greg Luca mentioned, he doesn't get paid.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
and
this
I
ma-
kind of agree with you, but you brought up a different point. You cheer for this team down south that wears a little yellow and blue, and obviously he blew a gasket this week, and the fans like me on the outside that enjoy watching pressers. Oh my! I thought that was such a hilarious thing that he did when asked upon his youth players.
Hmm. Yeah,
And,
he pretty much said
it
that.
was-
Yeah, go ahead.
and it's true, and thankfully there's no restrictions as to how many minutes he can play or whatever, and it's good that we have players like him on the roster available and ready to roll.
Yeah, pretty much.
And even more specifically that are taking up an international slot.
Really, yeah, that's true. And so we're interested to see how his develop continues to develop. His development continues to form as time progresses. But before we kind of wrap this up, let's talk a little bit about this Saturday's match at home against Colorado Springs Switchbacks. So, as we know, the last time we played Colorado Springs Switchbacks, it was away. It was in Colorado Springs, and we lost that
And
match.
under difficult conditions.
Oh, and that's putting it lightly. The pitch was so bad. I think even Rayalos' pitch was better compared to Colorado Springs. But you're talking about
funny cuadros chicos. Funny. Ha 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 ha.
Okay, so the
Funny
thing.
cuadros chicos. Funny.
So the thing is like at that time in Colorado Springs, it was below freezing, if I'm not mistaken. This was still in the end of the winter. The pitch was it was a lot of patches all over. It was very uneven growth as well, and in the end we lost that match. I believe, what is it, like
3-2.
three? Yes, was it 3-2? Let me see. Because apparently. Okay. Anyways, no. I'm gonna take your word for it with that. So, but we lost that match, and it was, I believe that was the beginning of that little
Three-game
3-game
road
tour.
trip.
Yeah, the little 3-game road trip where we started with Colorado Springs, and then we went to, if I'm not mistaken,
Pacific Northwest.
yeah, we went to Tacoma. And I believe the third one was against Portland Timbers 2, or it was Portland 2,
Yes.
then Seattle.
No, it was Portland Timbers 2. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
Portland
it
Timbers,
was Seattle Sounders 2, and then
Portland Timbers 2.
Portland Timbers 2. I'm looking at the schedule right now. So Ray, you were close on the score. It was actually 2-1 that we lost to the Colorado Springs Switchback.
Swings, yes.
Which, by the way, is a very beautiful place. Hopefully, I get to go there soon. But anyways, so coming to this match, apparently this thing doesn't want to load. So coming to this match, the Toros are really not in the best of forms, but neither is the Switchbacks.
I mean, when are the Switchbacks
Yeah.
really ever truly on form?
You do have a good point with that, Jacob. But so let's take a look at what.
I
yeah.
believe they ended up losing to San Antonio, if I'm not mistaken, in their last time out.
Yep, and guess who scored for San Antonio in that match?
The
Kyle
God
Murphy.
bless. I thought it was
Kyle Murphy.
Charlie Ward.
No, he scored against. Wait, was it? No, I thought Charlie scored against Real Monarchs. No, Charlie scored
Charlie
against.
scores against Real Monarchs. My bad.
And then,
Kyle
and
Murphy.
then, yeah,
Yes.
Kyle Murphy scored against the Switchbacks last night. So right now their latest, yeah. So the last 5 matches for the Colorado Springs Switchbacks, they lost on July 3rd, 1-0 against Orange County. Tied 1-1 away, and that was at home. Tied 1-1 away with OKC Energy. Lost 1-0 at home versus Sacramento Republic FC. Defeat the Tulsa Roughnecks 4-2 at home, and then lost.
Here's an interesting factoid about Tulsa Roughnecks. They were able to pick up Frank Tayu's brother, Uzi Tayu, and they'll be seeing each other this Saturday, Fresno v. Tulsa. Just a little factoid out there.
It's really interesting, that family rivalry. Who, by the way, Frank Tayu, I believe, signed with the Monterey Flash for indoor, correct?
Oh, yeah. I get to see him twice a year. Let me go get a bucket while I can.
So, yeah. So they're coming in out of the last 5 matches. You're talking about 3 defeats. 3 defeats, 1 draw, and 1 loss. So they're not coming in with the best of forms away. Their away record right now is 2-7-1.
I mean, 2-7-1 away. Yeah, that is horrendous. It's just terrible. But at the same time, you look at RGVFC's, and it's even just RGVFC's record at home, and it's not that. It's
Not that
about
great.
the same right there.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not that great. So this game can be a toss-up. It just all depends on what RGVFC team we really see. Will we see the offensive RGVFC team? Will we see both the offensive and defensive RGVFC team? Or will we see this RGVFC team where we will only see their defense out there and their offense skying rockets?
Yeah. I hope we see the RGVFC that was very accurate with their shooting, rather than the one that was just shooting wherever. So Colorado Springs, they played in a 4-2-3-1 formation against San Antonio. They played with Stuart Seuss at the goalkeeper, Karsten Hanlon, Taylor Hunter, who is, I'm pretty sure a lot of you recognize him because he's an ex-RGVFC Dynamo player. Then he had Jamal Jack and Josh Suggs in the defense, Jordan Schweitzer and Kim Tai-sung as the central defensive midfielders. You had AJ Ajikwa, Luke Vercalone, Shane Malcolm in the attacking mids, and Martin Mabin as the striker. So a 4-2-3-1 formation. And they lost, like we said, 1-0 against our rivals, San Antonio. So, you guys have any predictions on this match?
I guess I'll go
Jacob, I'll
first
let you
here.
go.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, so, I mean, I'm going to hope for the best, and I'm going to go with the best here. We will see the RGVFC team that we saw versus Santos and versus not Tulsa, but whoever
Las
we
Vegas.
played that next, Las Vegas. There we go. Thank you. Almost forgot that non-good team that was basically from
That
Las
dumpster
Vegas there.
fire.
Yeah, exactly that dumpster fire of a team. Yeah, I see a good 2-0 victory for RGVFC with things getting a bit heated, but just a couple points issued out to each team. Not red cards, just yellow. So yeah, 2-0 victory. And then my bold prediction is, yes, things get really heated and tippers do flare. We might see a couple of brawls out. What I mean by that is the pushing and shoving match that we saw with Kai Green, where he picked up the lone yellow for RHVFC that one time. We see a couple of those. Just it gets a bit fierce there, but nothing more than another RGBFC win. This time 2-1.
Ray?
Well, based on the last time that we played these guys, I'm going to go ahead and predict a 3-1 game. Bold prediction. Bold prediction would probably be a couple of red cards, one for each side, and let's just say that that Colorado loses their man in the first half, and yet we somehow cannot take advantage of it. So we settle out for a 0-0 stalemate with each team losing a man.
All right. My prediction, 2-0 RGVFC. And I think my bold prediction is that Colorado Springs is going to keep this 0-0 y va a pasar la tragedia. They're going to win in the last minute, 1-0. That's my bold prediction.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that's what a Cuadro Chico thinks right there. Yeah, I'll be there for the match, and I'll try to be as nice as possible with the atmosphere. And this time, I might probably open up both windows just to garner a little bit more fan reaction, just based on what has happened this past week.
Yeah. So, guys, this pretty much wraps up today's episode. You guys have anything else you want to add before we go?
Well, actually, if I could just bring up this funny story.
Yeah, go ahead.
Last night, this Twitter account, 5 hours, I think I'll know, but I think they go by on their Twitter handle is I forget.
I think it's 504 Sports.
Yeah, at 504 Sports, something like that. But either way, it was really funny because of the fact that they just randomly, out of the blue, last night decided to at RGVFC and me, actually, my Twitter handle there, and even ESPN FC, and just I don't have the tweet with me at the moment.
So basically, what he said was that Americans find soccer boring because the narrators and the commentators are boring.
Yeah, exactly. That's the exact tweet. And it was just pretty funny to be added with none other than ESPN FC. And so I decided, since that man or whoever runs it was following me, I just decided to ask him because I was curious about that. And they said, because you all know soccer better than most people and you're enthusiastic about it. And I love y'all. Not like the lame ESPN announcers calling last night's matches, which that would be Tuesday's matches, terrible. Telemundo or Univision any day.
Which reminds me, I think one of the future videos for Down in the Valley Gaming, we should do some FIFA commentating. Wonder how that's gonna sound like.
Yes, exactly. Wonder how that would sound. That would be very exciting, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really looking forward to that. Ray, anything else you want to add?
No, I just look forward to reconvening with you guys after that long break on the August 18th when OKC comes into town.
Yeah, I shall be there for that match for sure. Just not.
Ooh, then I can share some secrets that I've been finding out about our indoor soccer team that cannot be disclosed yet.
Looking forward to that, man. It's really we're hyped up for this new season. For hopefully we get some improvements compared to last season. So, guys, really would like to thank you all for joining us for this live stream, for joining us, for listening to Greg Luca talk about this situation with the Toros. We had,
Greg.
Yeah, we had 6 likes in this video, which is really good. I think we peaked out at 10 viewers for this live stream. Really, really appreciate you guys. Be sure to be on the lookout for whenever the podcast version goes live on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play Store, and iTunes. So you can listen to that as well. Subscribe to those platforms if you haven't already at downintheRGV.com. Be sure to subscribe to Down in the Valley Gaming. We have some new content that we're going to be working on for your enjoyment. And as well, be sure to want to say hi to our friends from the Beautiful Game Network who help us a lot in getting our podcasts out there. Be sure to follow him at the BGNFM on Facebook and Twitter, and as well as check out their website at www.bgn.fm. And you also check out their sponsor, which is Roughneck Scarves. They are the official scarf supplier for MLS, USL, and NCAA. Their website is www.roughneckscarves.com. And also check out our website, downintheRGV.com. So really appreciate your support. Thank you, guys. And hopefully we can get the win against Colorado Springs Switchback. So that way next Wednesday, right? Please let me be right. Right. Come on, Dynamo. Please don't play on Wednesday again.
Well, I mean, I don't believe anyone knows when Houston will play LAFC.
It's on the.
I don't know if that date has
It's
been.
August 8th. So
August 8th. That's right. Okay.
Yeah. So it's not going to be next week. So we're good for next Wednesday. We're going to be back to regular scheduled programming at least for that week. Because next week it's going to be the Open Cup match against LAFC, so it'll probably move to Thursday. But anyways, I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Be sure to keep an eye out for our social media for whenever the podcast go up. And as always, hashtag We Are Toros, hashtag Somos Toros, and Forever Orange. Take care, guys. We'll see each other next Wednesday.
Paint me red in this light that isn't mine. Finding every reason you can find to question my love. Remember that it's not me. I was never the one who broke your heart. We both know I've been gentle from the start. So though the questions keep on coming this time, you know that I'll listen. You know I'll be patient with you. You're my baby. Maybe this time you'll know you can trust me.